All right. Thank you for choosing Minority Alliance Organization today. Today, we'll be discussing um, the epidemic within the Black community of not necessarily Black on Black crime, but the crimes that we commit within our community against one another. Because my true belief is, there is no such thing as Black on Black crime. Because if there was such thing as Black on Black crime, there would be white on white crime, Asian on Asian crime, because that's normally whoever's in your community is normally who you're committing the crimes against. So when it comes down to people trying to use, oh, well, Black on Black crime to justify, in a sense, police brutality and things of that nature, I think that that's something that, I can't agree with, in its entirety. I mean, it does play a percentage of a role, but it's not something that is entirely true. That's just who you're around. That's who you interact with on the daily. So that's normally, if you commit a crime, that's normally who it's going to be against. So we have been looking at a couple numbers this week, and when it comes to the numbers of blacks who commit crimes against other blacks, I believe the percentage came out to be 89%, uh, versus the 79% of crimes that white people commit on other white people. But the huge number that really stuck out to me was, and what got me curious was, how many blacks commit crimes against whites and how many whites commit crimes against blacks. And when you start to look at those percentages, is when you start to get the true uh, of what's going on and how we are hindering ourselves and hindering our own communities by committing these acts against one another. Because I believe the black against white homicide percentage was 8%, and the white against black homicide rate was 17%, which, when you're looking at it you're talking about thousands and thousands of deaths, a 10% difference is a huge difference. So basically, my question, towards you, Mark, I know you said you had skimmed over it really quick, and I just want to see your perspective of, what you had read over on how us continuing to do these things against one another is not helping with the equality that we're asking from everyone else right now.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say that, this is a subject that's very, near to me. Just based on my own background, just to give you a little bit of my own background. I grew up on the west side of Detroit. Anybody in the group that may be from Michigan, they'll know, like, the Livernois and Puritan area, and also the 8 Mile and Myers area. So, growing up, that kind of, street level, kind of neighborhood, homegrown kind of, one-on-one violence, community on community violence was something that was kind of like always ever present, during my childhood, growing up in the 80s and things like that. So, I started thinking about this really long and hard when we decided we were going to talk about this. And, I started thinking in the whole, in the grander sense of equality and what equality actually meant to me, because it's one of those things that has a meaning, a generalized meaning, but it does mean something a little bit different to everyone. And to me, what equality really comes down to is respect. What we are looking for and what we've been looking for, is equal respect, and respect on every level, financially, criminal justice, and how we're perceived when it comes to jobs, when it comes to loans, all those different things. We're looking for the respect of being Americans, of being human, things like that. So when I look at it, where does equality start? And equality, like everything else, has to start at home. And that means that respect that we're looking for has to come from home first. There's not enough general respect between us. I kind of, asked this of the group, and I asked it and, and a few other people in my own circle. as to, the people that you met, the people that you talk to, the people that deal with, whether it be family, whether it be friends, and the people that you've chosen to, let go over time. What are those things? What are, deal breakers to you, things like that. And it turns out that the overwhelming majority of it was for disrespect and the inability to forgive and the inability to respect someone once they've disrespected you. And this permeates itself so deeply into so many things that's going on in our community, which leads to a lot of this violence that we're seeing. We're seeing, it's not that it's a new epidemic, but what the epidemic is now is that when we see it in those smaller percentages, when we see it coming from police officers, when we see it coming from, the white community or something like that, there is a kind of inherent outrage that exists there. I mean, we're willing to march in the streets. We're willing to some of these marches get a little out of control. Some things happen. We demand change. We want all these different things done. But when we're looking at situations, in some of the numbers, and you'll touch a little bit more on the percentages in a moment, but we're seeing, so many numbers that are so overwhelmingly happening in our own community, by our own people, towards our own community, towards our own people. And we don't have that collective outrage. We don't have that collective respect for one another to need our situation to be better, to need our situation to be more conducive to the type of growth that we are looking for, because we're looking for respect and growth and opportunity for growth outside of our community from the way others deal with us. But the question has to be turned inward on itself as to what type of respect and growth is being allotted towards one another. What respect and growth is being allotted towards our children? What respect and growth is being allotted towards our families and towards our friends and towards our community, towards our schools, towards everything that we're doing right now? We've gone through a bit of an awakening, during this past, cycle of understanding that, there are things that aren't right. We can point things out, and more people are awake to it. More people are cognizant of what's going on, and they're marching, and there are different things going on. But where is that energy, towards, the improvement that we're expecting from one another? We've been saying it for several calls now, asking a very simple question: are you your brother's keeper? And that answer to me is a resounding yes, because none of us can do this alone. One of the things that I thought about is, and one of the things I was working on is, some of the secret slave traits. And I think one of the, because we know about a lot of the other traits that were given, the language and the religion and names and, all sorts of things, eradication of culture and the indoctrination to, a more westernized culture, all those other things. But some of the things that don't get spoken of is individualism. And some of the individualism that you see take place here that doesn't exist elsewhere is another thing that is kind of consuming and leading to that level of disrespect and that level of, inequality amongst ourselves, towards ourselves. And these are all things that, as we are taking a more scrutinous look at society as a whole and what we should expect from our law enforcement, from our leaders, from our communities, we got to turn that inward as well. And we got to turn that towards ourselves and take a really deep, hard look at how we are handling things and how we're dealing with things and how we want to perceive, how we want to be perceived to one another and to the outside world as well, because no one's going to hand these things to us. We want an opportunity, but at the same time, we also have to put in the sort of work that is going to be needed across the board with at least a majority of our people in these neighborhoods as a whole, if we want to see the type of improvement that we're looking for.
Yes, sir. And I know prior to starting, I was kind of telling you about the numbers, and I'm just going to pull the year 2019, last year, for one of the numbers. As far as police killings against Blacks, there was 235 homicides committed by police officers. At the same rate, we committed 2,574 homicides against one another. So when you look at those numbers and you know how they stack up, my belief at this point is you can't just continue to ask for one thing from one side that you're not going to ask from your own community at this point. And even digging a little bit deeper, um, as I told you, earlier this year, after the things had occurred in Atlanta, they had a little section of Atlanta that the police were actually not responding to for about a month period there. One of the zones on that side there, where around the Wendy's area where Rashard Brooks got killed, and right on that road, right in front of the same spot, there was a young girl, Sequoia Turner, who actually, an 8-year-old girl, who got shot in the car because at that point it wasn't an officer who killed her. It was one of our own in our own community who actually took her life. And to me, when you look at the numbers of over the past few years, I had told you about in Missouri a while, I believe it was about a year or two ago, over a 6-month period, there were 13 black kids killed by stray bullets and things of that nature and gun violence, period. So when we look at, we're not at this point, it's not even we're committing these things against ourselves, but it's worse when, because of a problem that you have with someone else, a kid's life is actually taken very young, especially a minority kid who never had the opportunity, who could have possibly grown up to be a doctor, or, possibly gave us a leg up as a minority community, as being somebody who represented us in a occupation where we are not showing at this point. So, I just wanted to hear you take a little bit, on that end, with that information, that's at this point, what do we do when it's getting that deep to where kids from the ages of 6 to 14 are losing their lives before they even have an opportunity?
Yeah. There are two things at play there. Number one, math is still undefeated. When we're talking about these deaths in our community, that's a number nearly 10 to 1. And we think about these movements, and don't get me wrong, I would never pour dirt on any of these movements, to say her name, and in a broader sense, not necessarily group itself, but in a broader sense, Black Lives Matter. But there needs to be at least equal energy towards what's happening, amongst ourselves, and and all these deaths in our community. If we're seeing deaths in a level of 10 to every 1, the energy is not even a fraction of one versus the other. Like, that doesn't add up. So that's my first thing. And then the second thing is that, the first thing that we're looking for when it comes to this, when we want to see some of these deaths come down, is we're looking to protect, the sanctity of life for our people. We're looking for those opportunities, and we're looking for those rights, and we're looking for that sort of protection and safety. But we can't do any of those things if we can't protect our children. If we're not protecting our children, and if our children are not sacred, and if our children are not being taken care of in these communities, and if the violence, the street level violence of doing what you got to do, or doing what you want to do because you feel disrespected, or you feel like whether it be over amounts of money, whether it be over dope, whether it be over just general disrespect that escalated and elevated, whether it be over some rap songs where you said something to somebody else and they didn't like it, whatever the case may be. I mean, these things are happening, and we have our children that are being affected by this. These are young men and women who don't get a chance at life. I mean, I posted an article on the site, yesterday, about a young man in Michigan living in Inkster, and Inkster, for anybody in Michigan, that's the hood as well. Once you get outside of Detroit, they always call it, because they used to call Detroit Beirut back in the day, and they call Inkster Little Beirut. And so this young man, has, risen to a legislative seat at the age of 24. Age 24, that young man has made it to a legislative state. Now, how many young legislators, how many young doctors, how many young, anything, engineers, how many did we lose? How many did we lose to, to gun violence in the street? Where is their march? Where is their t-shirt? Where is their energy to stop all these things? And I'm not saying this to shame anybody who did not do this. What I'm saying is that we've got to, move our attention. We've got to move this energy. We went through, about as ugly as an election cycle as this country may be capable of. And I say that knocking on wood, because who knows what 2024's got. But I would say this, the amount of energy that was expended in the winds of change that were brought about by the last year to year and a half that people were looking for, when people saw what happened, to Rashad Brooks, to Ahmaud Arbery, and to all the others that, and Breonna Taylor and all these others who've had those, and they deserve their attention. But we've also, even now, we can't even name a lot of these children. We can't name a lot of these children that had that had these horrible things happen to them, or cut down before they ever got a prime of life, before they ever got to shape themselves into being what they were going to be. And who knows what we lost. We are in a position right now, we can't afford to lose anything. We can't afford to lose any, of our young people, because again, in order to truly change things, we can put in the seeds now, we can put in the steps now, but the seeds of true change and the seeds of true, elevation of what we are and what we can be, well, those are children right now. Those people are children. That future is sitting out there, and they deserve, again, the type of racial accountability, the type of equality, the type of respect that should be afforded to them, if by nowhere else, by our own community. If we do nothing else, we have to respect and take care of and have that equality amongst ourselves before we can ever demand it of the world.
Yes, sir. And in that sense, it's my belief. We talked a little bit about it. I said, we have to allow each other the opportunity. Instead of just uh, jumping to pull out a gun on one another and shoot each other, or just fight each other, whatever the situation may be. And as you said earlier, you touched on it exactly. Whether it's over drugs, I feel like somebody looked at me the wrong way, said the wrong thing to me. We have to allow each other the opportunity, to express ourselves the correct way without taking one another's lives, because we're already losing one another at high rates from a lot of other things that we had going on in our communities. So why continue, adding on to the pile and to the names with things we do against one another? And that kind of, draws into, even talking about that subject. I had sent you the picture, that was going around on Facebook of the mother spanking her child or whatever, and it was like, well, did this help or hurt us? And I had said, I feel like I believe that's the root of a lot of the violence that we see against one another. Is Black parents are, they're twice as likely to punish their children using corporal punishment than a white or Latino parent. And that's not to say you shouldn't discipline your child, or knock any way anybody disciplines a child, or you discipline your child is how you discipline them. But when it comes to a sense of, we're trying to get a point of more opportunity within our own community, and we're asking for equality across the board, to receive equality across the board, we have to give it to one another, and we have to build these things up in our kids from the get-go. And I was telling you a little bit about how I did a little bit of research behind it. And you know when I know it's what did it come from, slavery basically, I believe was the root of it, where we learned from the master, somebody does something wrong, you get lashed, you get whipped. So I believe that's where originally it came from. I'm gonna let you talk a little bit on that, because I'm not, when it comes to the slavery, and I'm not too fluent on that myself and how it initially started and carried through. But I could say, at this point, it does build violent tendencies, and it builds an aggressive nature and a more defiant nature when you discipline your child through corporal punishment without there being a full drawn out lesson behind it, or you sitting down and actually having more so a conversation with them and allowing them to understand what they did wrong, without you just, as they say, hitting them with a belt or hitting them with a switch or anything of that nature. And I was looking, actually, was something that should have been a red flag, to the black community, was, I don't know if you remember, a while back, the whole Adrian Peterson situation, and where he actually had ended up going to court and things of that nature because he was disciplining his son, and I believe it was over a game. One of his kids had pushed the other one off the game or something of the sort, and he gave his kid a whipping, and his kid had went to the hospital, and they found out that that's where that came from. But even in that sense, Adrian Peterson, he said in that case, and I don't think he was necessarily wrong from the way, from what we've been taught within our communities through the parenting process. I wouldn't say he was necessarily wrong, because he didn't know any better. That's the way he was taught to punish your child. And what do they say in the Bible? You spare the rod, spoil the child. So I believe in the black community, we've took those words out of the Bible and ran with them. Well, if I don't discipline them this way, then the world's going to teach them a lot worse than what I could ever do to them. And I think we need to lose that type of mentality, because we are building the kids who are going out here. And, not saying all of them, who end up getting a situation with an officer and lose their lives and things of that nature. But, you know, when you're creating a defiant character within someone, it's a higher percentage chance that if an authoritative figure asks them to do something, they're not going to adhere to it. So, you know, things of that nature have carried on to why normally we see within even the education system, there are more black kids personally who end up always in trouble, suspended in ISS and things of that nature, because it's a defiance. If once you've been beat or once you've been hit, at what point, what worse can happen, and what do you fear? You don't fear when a teacher says words to you more so than when you see a belt or when you're actually getting hit by a switch or things of that nature. So I just want to talk a little bit on that end, and get your personal preference. How can we change these things? Starting at the root of these issues, so that we're not getting to the point where we're committing violence against each other, or we're not being defiant against law enforcement and things of that nature to draw us more into these issues with police officers and things.
Well, I want to start off, before I dive in too deep, I want to say that you hit the nail right on the head. Going back to the Adrian Peterson thing, he wasn't wrong from the sense of how he was taught. That's exactly the point right there. Now, going back to kind of the slave element to it, is that there was a simple equation when it came to how slaves are dealt with. It is a simple deal: action, consequence, and escalation. There's an action, you did an action that wasn't what they wanted. You didn't take action when they wanted action. You took an incorrect action, or you took an action that you weren't authorized to take. There was a consequence. If you continue to do it, the consequence will escalate. And it was meant to teach a lesson: do what I say, period, full stop. So as that kind of mutated along, and again, I talk about the secret slave traits, that sort of action and consequence thing, it bled into the corporal punishment style of child rearing. And again, I don't speak ill on how someone else raises their child. My wife and I, we've raised children, there wasn't a whole lot of that around. There wasn't a whole lot of that. And one of the reasons was because, children are, they're pieces of clay. They have to be molded, and we have a responsibility. We created this person, we brought them into this world, and that person comes into this world. They literally can be anything. I don't think anybody knew. I don't think Barack Obama's mother knew when he was born that he was going to be president one day. I don't think that when LeBron James was born, his mom knew what was going to happen there. You know, we grow and we become different things, and you can stunt that growth. You can stunt those things by taking away choices, and you can take away choices by not allowing a person to develop reason. And when a person only understands action and consequence, what you take away is reason. There isn't a thought process as to how I got here. Is a thought process as to why this is wrong. A thought process as to why I shouldn't think or act or react in the manner in which they got me into this trouble in the first place. It's there's a misplaced energy that comes along with that. When a person just deals in action and consequence, then you don't get a chance to kind of feel like, oh my God, I did something wrong. I mean, I hurt my mom when I did that. I hurt my sister when I did that. I hurt someone's feelings when I did that, and that is incorrect. And I should not be doing something like that. There's got to be a different way to do things. I can't do that. That's not there. What's there is I did something, I got my ass beat. And again, that's just simple and as primal as it gets. Action and consequence. And those are the sort of things that they take later in life. So when you start seeing them get in trouble in school, you start seeing them get in fights in school. Why? Well, I got disrespected. Action, consequence. You see somebody shoot up the club. Why? Oh, well, I got disrespected. Somebody talks a mess to me. Action, consequence. Escalation. I can't have nobody doing that again. I can't have nobody disrespecting me. How many times have we heard that? From full-grown adults. We hear people say things like that, and the reason we hear people say things like that is because they've been disrespected in the past. They gave a consequence, and it's escalated. So these things never go away. And when these lessons come so early in life, they solidify themselves. There's a child psychologist that said that we get about 80 to 85% of what you're going to be as a person mentally from birth to age 5. So if all you learn is action and consequence between birth and age 5, don't be surprised that action and consequence is what you understand when you are 15, 25, 35, and however long you make it. So number one, there needs to be a lesson and an understanding in what you're trying to do. If you're trying to punish a child for doing something, what are we trying to do here? We all have a responsibility, and we all say the same thing when we become parents. We want the same thing for our children, which is better than we had it, and to have every opportunity in life. But for far too many people, when it comes to punishment, well, this is how my mom did me, so this is what I'm going to do. Wait a minute. You just said you wanted your child to have better. Okay. So when you don't make that commitment to doing that, you're inadvertently continuing a cycle and a chain, because the person, going back to the Adrian Peterson thing, he did what he knew. So that means that going back, he did what he knew, which means his parents did what they knew, which means their parents did what they knew. The chain was unbroken. And whether it's, allowing yourself to get that enraged to where, lesson time is out the window, it is just consequence. And if memory serves, his son was 4 at that time. So again, that's right in that bubble that I was talking about. So as these things continue to go on, and his thing just happened to have blown up the way it was because obviously he was famous and he was on top of his game at the time. So it kind of, it blew up and it took on a life of its own. But it kind of falls into what we're talking about, because a topic like this actually bleeds into our other topic. Because when we talk about that type of accountability to one another, well, where does that start? Does that start as adults? I am 44 years old. Is this the year that I start learning how to respect people in my community? Is that how that works? Not at all. It starts with younger kids, and it starts with how we're treating those closest to us. Again, like we talk about those zones, right? Yourself, your family, your community, your country. Well, it starts with how you are going to do things and how you are going to deal with things inside your own home and inside your own family with your own children, things like that. And how, what lesson are we trying to teach them? What do we want them to do? What do we want them to react this way? What choices do we want them to make in the future? And those choices should not be at, under penalty of pain. That there's no lesson to be learned under penalty of pain. The only lesson to be learned there is, this happens, you pay the price. This happens, you pay that price. And that's a lesson, again, that we far too often is being taken out into the street, and it's being taken into schools, and it's being taken, into all these other situations. And then we end up seeing situations where we're burying people. And we're seeing situations where people aren't talking to one another, or people aren't communicating, people are not able to support one another. People are trying to get things off the ground, and they're not ready to support one another because, back when we were kids, she disrespected me, and, ain't nobody gonna disrespect me. So again, that the action was disrespect, the consequences, I'm not gonna talk to my sister. These things they're corrosive to the community. They're corrosive to a person's own development. And if they're corrosive to the community and to a grown adult development, what do we think it's doing to children? So, it's one of those things where we need to, not just use our own kind of psychological rear view mirror. We need to actually turn around and take a look at, how these things are going and the effects that they have. Every single one of our effects have consequence. And as a parent, you're it. You own that child's world. You are God in the eyes of the child. And do we want, kind of that wrathful kind of Old Testament way of growth? Because I don't know, again, I'm not a religious person, but I do understand the Bible. I do understand the text, and not a lot of learning and growth in the Old Testament. I can certainly tell you that. So, it was consequence. And so there were lessons there, but there's also a lot of consequence. So we have choices, and the type of respect that we're looking for from others, we got to give to ourselves, and we got to give it to our children, and we got to give them the opportunity to make better choices and to do better things and to think about things and to think themselves about the type of lessons that need to go on in their own lives when they are met with an obstacle, when they are met with the type of slights or disrespect or things like that. Should you then go forth and try to punish someone for disrespecting you? Should you escalate the next time something happens? What do we want from this? And what do we want from our kids? That I believe is the biggest thing that we should be looking at. And I think that it would actually kind of change the way a lot of us approach these situations.
Yes, sir. And then, the last numbers that I had wanted to look at, because my curiosity, peaked too. We're looking at I know me and you have been talking about, like, what are the next things that we need to really be looking into further after the election has occurred. Our goals haven't ended, and reaching for equality within our community. And that's why we're having, this discussion on this topic. So, I was looking more so at, we're looking for equality in the justice system. And, I believe it starts off, it was 50 to 70% of kids black kids who end up within the judicial system have actually experienced, some sort of corporal punishment as a child. So that's already established that mentality. And, I'm not saying we wouldn't be looking at equality within the justice system if these things had not occurred, but I believe we would be looking at it at a lot less rate, and looking at way lower numbers of fighting these situations at that level if we hadn't established these things within our kids during those younger years. So it just goes into what warrants corporal punishment from a parent to a child. And everybody has their own opinion on it and things of that nature, but As I had told you before, my true opinion is, if it's a disrespect issue, because even as a parent growing up, we've all made mistakes. We've all uh, done dumb things, talked back in class, joked around too much at a time when it wasn't a time to joke around, and things of those nature. But am I gonna strictly punish or whip my kid because they got in trouble for talking too much in class? No. Now, when it comes to the line for me, my line is, it is at disrespect, and more so than disrespect, a constant level of disrespect. Or if you're not understanding what I'm saying through me sitting you down and talking with you with words, and we've had this conversation a few times, then at that point it may need to, go to a different level, and that may warrant, you having to take a belt out. I don't suggest any other tool or anything of the sort. If are going to use something, a belt to the behind, if anything, that may be warranted through a constant level of disrespect. But anything further than that, I don't see a need for it, because, as you said, these are what we're trying to accomplish right now, is equality across the board, and it all starts, with our kids, because we're already all at age, we're old enough, we've lived it, we've been through it. But how can we stop it from the get go, so that we can kill these generational cycles that we continue to see within our communities? So, that's basically what we are looking at this point. Um, we got to start nipping things in the bud earlier on, so we're not having the constant conversation of another young black man is getting killed by an officer because he was defiant against the officer, and things of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, my wife was speaking with, a new member, or I guess a long lost member of her family. She's been, going through her ancestry a little bit, and actually finding, family members and learning about family members. She actually found family members that are 2 hours from where we live that, some of them she had no idea of. And they were talking about, different things about raising kids and things like that. And there was a punishment I had never heard before in my life, where they had these children sitting in a corner on their knees on uncooked rice. Like, I'm sorry, what is the lesson there? You know, um, we have to think about these things as the literal, shaper. We're the architects of a child's world. And although children are going to test borders, they always do. They always will. They're going, I've always said this, every child learns the stove is hot the same way, and it's not from conversation. So they're going to be testing borders. They're going to test, boundaries and things like that. But number one, as a parent, we should expect that. Number two, we should never stunt their curiosity, because, not knowing where the line is doesn't necessarily make you, eligible for punishment necessarily. And I think that if if you get to that situation where you need to adjust somebody like that, and, again, an occasional pop, all right, it is what it is on that. And everybody has to kind of make their own decisions. But I think when we're causing injury, I think there needs to be, there's a different way, because again, they're going to take our lessons from us, whether we teach it or not. And you'll know, whether it's financial education, whether it's spiritual education, whether it's sex education, our children are going to either learn lessons from us, or they're going to learn it on their own. But if they learn it on their own, they're probably going to learn it wrong. And we need to be prepared for that. We are going to leave these impressions on our children through our actions and through our inactions. So, I think a constant understanding of our power in that regard is, the foundation as to how they're going to be, and the foundation of how our children are going to be is the foundation of the future of our community. And I think that's what we need to understand. Our children are not just, small human beings. They're not just, our children or whatever. Every single person that you make, and I truly believe this, is an investment you have made to the world. because it's another person. It's another person. There are so many people born every day and every year, and the world does evenly distribute talent, even though it doesn't evenly distribute that opportunity. But as we continue to fight for more opportunity, we need to be able to nurture them and give them their own opportunities to grow. I think, and the more that they are given that opportunity to grow and to learn the lessons and to learn how to deal with other people, it will make their ability to deal with the outside world that much better. It's not, yes, they're going to need to be tough. And yes, as a minority, you're definitely going to need to be tough because there are other things stacked against you. But what I would say, just kind of in my closing before I hand it back to you, is we have enough against us, right? As a minority in this country, we have enough against us already. We have all the different systematic issues that we have to deal with. We have the fact that we have a lower life expectancy. We have, financial, racial inequalities that we're trying to battle uphill to deal with. And then you throw on top of that, disenfranchisement, employment opportunities, our ability to get loans and to own homes and to own businesses. And then you go through all those different things. And let's go ahead and throw COVID on top of that. There are so many things that we are dealing with and that we have riding against us. And we are people that are bred and born and tough enough to get through all those things and persevere. We do it all the time, but we don't need to do it to ourselves as well. And that starts with our kids, and that starts with how we're bringing them up and how they feel and how they see us and how they feel about us and how they feel about their place in this world. And that has everything to do with how we respond to them as they learn and respond to this world.
Yes, sir. And I mean, with closing out today, I would say, there is no right way to parent. It's a learning process for all of us. Whether you become a parent at a young age or old age, parenting is a learning lesson. You learn as you go. But at the same time, it's something within our own communities that we need to start, looking into different ways of discipline instead of the same old go-to that we've been using, for generation after generation. It's time that we end, these cycles at this point, especially when, as you said, over the past year and a half, we've been going through this huge awakening within our communities of starting to see, oh well, there is police brutality going on at high levels. There is a lot of crooked things going on within the judicial system, especially when it does come to minorities and things of that nature. So, even going forward with our push of keep going and continuing to speak on different topics within our community, what we're trying to do is build ways we can start teaching one another, or even if it's having a conversation with another parent saying, a different way that, you punish your child. I know I had told you a little bit earlier this week, I was like, I don't even remember the last time I had to even really put my hand on my kid. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'll put him in a push up frame, and he doesn't like it too much like that, and if that's what works in that situation, then that's what works, whatever works, but it's not going to be a one size fits all type of situation, and nobody's saying anything of that nature. But you have to try every which way before you come to corporal punishment, or using an item to actually spank them or whoop them or things of that nature. So there is no perfect way, and we're not having this conversation so everybody's wrong if you do it or anything of that nature. However you raise your kids is how you raise your kids, and everybody's liable to their own opinion and their own way of doing things. But if we are to reach the level of equality uh, in every field that we're looking to reach going forward, it's 2020. Let's knock a lot of these things in the bud now, and let's be able to build up a generation come behind us that they don't have to face the same things that we had to face throughout life and things of that nature. So, as I said, anybody who has any other topics, throughout the organization that they would like to bring to our attention, to speak on, or if there's anything else they feel we need to dig into, and, you know, what we're trying to do here is build basically a blueprint, a groundwork, a frame for us to reach the level of equality going forward that we are looking to reach in every area.
Absolutely. And everybody gonna, as we move forward, make sure that once this gets posted up, like, share, leave a comment, subscribe so that you see these alerts. As we go through and more content gets posted. I mean, we're all in this together. So the more content we have and the more ideas we banter back and forth, the more we can help one another. There's always going to be somebody out there who's lost, or somebody out there that doesn't know, or somebody that hears these things for the first time and it's able to affect them. All of this is about a positive effect and positive change, so that we can move our community forward and push things forward. Again, that is the only agenda of this organization, and it has been since the beginning. So as we move forward, as we see, the things that are going on, and as things continue to develop, we got to continue to do the same thing as we always should be, which is take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and make sure that we keep our eyes open, and keep those minds open as well. So, everybody take care, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see y'all next week.
Yes, sir. And then also speaking, COVID, I believe the numbers are skyrocketing every day at this point. And, we're possibly about to see another lockdown nationwide. So, with everybody, please, if you go out, wear your mask in public in certain areas and things that, and, keep everyone around you safe, especially within our own communities. I believe within the minority community, we have been affected at higher rates than any other community when it does come to COVID deaths and things of that nature in America alone. I can say that. But we've really got to work to, as you said, the question you end with every week is the one I'm gonna end with now. Are you your brother's keeper? Are you your neighbor's keeper? We have to look out for one another because there's nobody else looking out for us.
Absolutely. We most certainly are.